Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be reviewing a speech by Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia. And he goes over a lot of really interesting topics in this speech, so I want you to stick around and stay tuned to what he's saying, because this really is a deciding factor for the future of the world. Right now, I would say that Russia and China are the two countries that are deciding the fate of the world. The United States is really just kind of reacting to the moves of Russia and China, and they're playing a very scared, very erratic game. And Vladimir Putin here is going to really tell you the playbook for Russia and for the new multipolar world bloc. And so this video is actually going to be broken up into multiple parts, so you're going to want to stay tuned for all of those parts.
President Putin, the floor is yours.
Friends, Mr. President, ladies, gentlemen, from the outset, I would like to welcome our friend, the President of the Algerian Republic, for having found the time and for coming here to today's event. Mr. President, thank you. Mr. President, guests from outside Russia, certainly my statement is mostly going to be dedicated to Russia's development as well as our plans along different avenues. But I believe that this is going to be of certain interest to you too, because many of you are either already working in Russia or hoping and planning to work here, and so you're not going to be indifferent to our assessments of the current state of affairs in our country, as well as our plans in order to understand whether to deal with us.
So he's saying this on a number of levels here. On one level, Russia internally has a very important market. It has the most natural resources of any country in the world. But then when you look abroad, outside of its domestic sphere, then you also see that Russia is extremely important in terms of its historical relations with countries all across the world. Soviet Union, as you probably remember, really never reached the GDP or even close to the GDP of the United States of America. However, they still were one of the few countries that had really deep ties to essentially all 200 and some countries in the world. And Russia really inherited that from the Soviet Union. And due to that, they have a lot of influence, I would say an outsized influence given the size of their economy. They're often compared to a country like Italy in terms of their economic output, but Russia has other historical reasons for what I would call punching above its weight class. It's able to do things far exceeding its economic output. And that has allowed it to be considered the third superpower in contemporary society, along with China and the United States. So it's really clear here, even if you don't want to, or even if your country does not want to work within Russia, it's still important to understand what's going on with the Russian Federation because of the fact that they hold such an outsized influence across the entire world. I mean, the Ukraine war alone was a shell shock, or they would call it a special military operation, but it is the fighting for territory and fighting, in Russia's case, to protect citizenry of former Ukraine that spoke Russian that were being discriminated against. And so just Russia, for a variety of reasons, is an extremely important country in contemporary society. And again, a term I think you should remember is Russia is fighting above its weight class. It's far exceeding what you would typically expect for a country of this size. And I like to say that Vladimir Putin is really just holding up Russia with duct tape and just the force of his will, because you got to remember, after the 1990s, when the oligarchs pillaged and stole all the resources from Russia for the sake of the West, it's hard to imagine Russia coming back from that. And Vladimir Putin managed to get Russia to come back from that and be considered a superpower for his people again. And so really just a miraculous recovery, and he's done so much. If I had to be in either Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping's shoes, I would definitely choose Xi Jinping. He had a lot of things that were beneficial for his time as a leader of China. Vladimir Putin really just through force of will brought that country back under control. So really just miraculous. Both of them are miraculous, but it's like comparing in a video game, like playing as the leader of Russia, that's like nightmare difficulty. And then I would say playing as China, it's like medium, hard difficulty, but like doing what Vladimir Putin did, it's nothing short of a miracle.
And I think, and I hope that this is going to be of some interest to Mr. President as well. My apologies in advance if in certain parts of my statement I am going to address primarily the internal audience, but what we are doing currently in our economy might be of some use for other countries and might serve as a foundation for our cooperation. Once again, I would like to welcome the participants and guests of the 26th International Economic Forum in St. Petersburg. I spoke here last year and shared my vision of the challenges Russia and the whole world were facing, and I dwelled in detail on our actions meant to ensure steady, long-term sovereign development of our country. I would like to remind you that the second quarter of last year became the most difficult one for Russia's economy and for Russia's business, because back then circumstances were changing rapidly, as well as the routine methods of trade, settlements, logistics, the very fabric of economic life was being rewoven.
So he's talking about the second quarter of last year, and that had to be a very chaotic time for Russia. And it's almost miraculous that they were able to be resilient in the face of the sanctions that they faced. Remember, their money within the Western system was completely frozen, and then they're doing absolutely everything they can to steal it nowadays. The Western countries are. And so it's absolutely miraculous that they were able to do as well as they were when they were cut off from the entire, what would be called the international financial system, the international economy. They were cut off from that completely, and really, we should also call that the Western financial system and Western economy. But they were cut off from that completely, and they figured out alternatives to be successful.
As of now, colleagues, we might be confident in saying that the strategy which was chosen back then by the government and by the business in Russia has yielded results. Positive macroeconomic trends are gaining momentum. In April this year, our GDP grew by 3.3% year-on-year, and by the end of the year, it will have gained more than 1 percentage point. At least that is the IMF.
So that's just absolutely miraculous that they managed to recover from the sanctions, not only as quickly as they did. So they weren't like just doing okay. They were actually growing during a time when the West was in a recession after the West implemented these sanctions. So that really did change the world. And people don't talk about it enough. I heard about it on the Duran. He also talked about it, but it was the two Alexes that talked about it. But other countries, and I think I've even talked about this in my prior videos as well, other countries have been sanctioned unilaterally by the United States or multilaterally by the Western powers. It's been in such a way that it hasn't abided by international laws and standards and norms. However, there's other countries, they've always kind of crumbled in the face of Western sanctions. Russia and China, though, they're facing massive sanctions, and they're actually successful at being resilient in the face of those sanctions. And so we should really be impressed with what's going on in Russia and China right now, because they've done so much that it's woken up the rest of the world to what's possible. It's not just a death sentence when the United States somewhat arbitrarily uses its economic power, its clout, in order to beat other countries into submission. Now, we know that it's possible to not only survive these sanctions that go against international law, but it's possible to grow from the fact that you're decoupled from that international system. And so that's a huge, huge, huge benefit that Russia has shown the world. So two things changed the world to be more favorable to the multipolar bloc. One was United States misusing its financial and economic hegemony. The other was the country that was bullied by the United States not only survived, but thrived. And so huge, huge development. In other countries, like Saudi Arabia, like Egypt, like Argentina, like Turkey, they looked at this and said, well, wait a minute, maybe we don't have to be bullied. Maybe we can be autonomous countries with agency and sovereign nations. Like maybe there's an alternative path. And they didn't think it was possible before. And so this is a huge, huge development, and we should be talking about that more.